I ran into the state biologist when I was playing Green Ridge this year, and he's actually from the Eastern Shore. And so we worked 3 different birds, not knowing that the other person was there. And we worked 4 different times.
Always stoked to be out here. Virginia was an awesome show last year. We've doubled in size now this year, and I look forward to keep, making Virginia a staple stop going forward. But for those of you who are new to the show, one of the key aspects is the speakers. We talk a lot of gear, we talk a lot of tactics. We will dive into the super nuts of mobile whitetail hunting, as deep and as thorough as possible. But the speakers provide a very, very special aspect to the event. And because, every event, I try and handpick people who are not only consistently successful, but over a wide range of areas. So we have local people to the northeast, we have Midwesterners, some down south, so all different terrains, all different types of tactics and styles, if you will. So even some of you experienced guys who've been, doing it and you got it figured out, you can always kind of pick and choose, take little things from different people and gravitate to who might be hunting your specific area. Maybe pick their brain a little bit more. And I can speak, even for myself, every show I'm taking little nuggets of information, whether it be on a gear mod or how somebody does something, and that's the key, I think, is to really be absorbing that information. So with that being said, I'm going to go through, our speakers are going to introduce themselves, say a little bit about their style of hunting in a nutshell, how they got, where they're from, and the terrain they typically hunt. So that'll give you a really good idea when we break off and do the demonstrations of who you're going to want to look at and, pick their brain a little bit more. So we'll start over on the end. Justin, let them know. Come on up here.
My name is Justin Sinen. Appreciate all you guys, giving us your Saturday. Hopefully you'll walk away with some great knowledge today. I'm actually from Central Maryland. I moved to Western Kentucky about 4 years ago.
Real quick, can you guys hear us? Raise your hand if you're struggling to hear us. Nobody can hear us? Cool.
So primarily, I started off in the mobile hunting game at a younger age with a climber. Moving to the Midwest, I actually gravitated more towards the saddle style. I hunt a lot of really thick woods, smaller trees. For my applications, the saddle is just, it just fit my style really well. We'll get into all that kind of different stuff, but we do a lot of ground where I live at is really similar to this area. We've got rolling hills, hill country, some flat ag country, so it's a good mixture. Really, as far as everything goes with our system, I'm running the fix, some double sticks. We'll do a demonstration here soon with everything, but it's been a great system for me. Really looking forward to sharing some knowledge with you guys, and hope you guys enjoy the day.
Josh Sampson, from Central Pennsylvania. I started hunting when I was 12 years old out of wooden tree stands that were pre-built. And I didn't get into mobile hunting until probably 5 years ago. I started with a climber, and about 3 years ago I switched to this system, and it's just changed everything for me. I've consistently had more encounters with better bucks, just more gear. I'm running .5 with 3 doubles, 17-inch doubles, and 2 acres. What's up, y'all? I'm Garrett Fenner, known as Modern Assassin. Very early on in hunting, I learned I can shoot a bow, I can shoot a gun. Getting in the right skill and get that shot was what was important. So I started off with a really cheap bow and a really expensive stand, the Lone Wolf Stick and Climb, which was one of the best at the time, and And I hunted in that for 15 plus years until I started getting even deeper in the woods. And I hunt everywhere from Sickett Deer in Maryland, where I can basically see the beach, all the way out into Ohio. So I hunt a little bit of everything. And you know, I found limitations in saddles and platforms, and I helped various companies design different ones over the years. And ultimately, I told Cody even before the .5 was out, I said, this may sound silly to you, but I'm going to saddle hunt from the .5. And I promise you it's going to be a game changer. For me, it has been. And I know there are a lot of guys that hybrid hunt now, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, basically my saddle is glorified safety harness. I like the .5, or this is my .75 setup. A little bit bigger for longer day sits, rut hunts, things like that. But I just find with the lone wolf system, I really prefer the double steps too. That's another thing. I'm big on the double steps. Having your feet the same level, everything else I think is key. But yeah, carrying that .5 or .75 for the weight it takes over a saddle platform, I don't find much weight difference, especially being that it works as a frame tank. But having a saddle, having one of these micro stands, I literally feel like I have no limitation. I can hunt any tree, any direction, and be in the right place, which I know I can make a shot. I just got to be in the right place to do it. So
Garrett does a lot of filming. Garrett does a lot of filming too. So
yeah.
you know, takes a lot of gear, runs multiple cameras. You know, so you know, really good wealth of knowledge for that kind of stuff too, and you know, heavier pack loads.
That's the only reason I'm running a pack this size is because I've got, you know, my camera arm, my camera, extra batteries, 2 or 3 GoPros, all kinds of shit. Otherwise, you see how many people have been checking out the new bag now. That's going to be a big hit. Thank you.
See, these guys are going to teach you how to kill deer with a bow. I'm going to teach you how to kill one with that. I'm David Miller from Southern West Virginia. Good to be with you guys. Let me ask you a question. How many of you hunt a few, like 2 or 3 maybe areas, you don't cover a lot of land, but you focus primarily on just a couple of places?
Show of hands.
Yeah, show of hands. Okay, how many of you run and gun and you try to cover as much absolute area as you possibly can? Okay. Awesome. Yeah, fair mix. So, I live in Southern West Virginia. I hunt the archery only county. Any of you guys show of hands? Any of you guys ever hunt the archery county, Southern West Virginia? It's a different breed down there, right? Different terrain. It's similar to some of this, what I saw coming down this morning. It is similar to some of this terrain here. But the reason I didn't bring a pack is because honestly, I use the saddle rigs, I use the small stand, I use sort of a hybrid between it all depending on where I'm hunting. I hunt such a variety of terrain and a lot of different habitats, and I have to be ready for whatever the given moment gives me. So yeah, during these breakout sessions we have, if you have any questions, but what I'm going to be, just ask me anything about like Southern West Virginia. I'll be glad to put you in some directions. I know a lot of people have a question about the public land down there. I can help you out a lot there. But I'm going to be going over a lot about brushing, like how to brush your. I've killed the past 5 years, the 5 deer that I've harvested in those counties. I've killed 4 of those 5 deer from the ground. But I have had close encounters in hunting setups using like hunting lower. Like Jacob taught me that I don't have to go to the top of that tree, even though sometimes it does call for that. You can go to that first limb or even lower and be good by using brushing cover. So I'm going to help you guys out with that. Good to be with you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm new to the staff. I'm very honored to be here because I've used their product for 20 plus years. But I tell you, I'm not new to hunting. I've been doing it for 40 years, bow hunting. I've seen stands, the old Baker stands. If any old timers remember those Baker stands that are wooden and heavy, and I always wanted to try to be mobile. My uncle and my grandfather taught me a lot of woodsmanship. So you're going to hear a lot of stuff today, and you're going to see a lot of stuff, but don't ever overcomplicate when you deer hunt, because it comes with a lot of woodsmanship, a lot of trying to understand the animal. And I have found my first 10 years of bow hunting, I shot a lot of deer, but I didn't get quality deer. And in '95, when I got my first buck, everything's measurable in life anymore, especially in social media. And I really don't measure my deer, but this deer, it got measured at 137, and that was back in '95, and that just set the whole pace for me as a hunter. I wanted more of that. That was unbelievable. So what I had to do is adapt, and I tried many stands, and I found the lone wolf assault. I could be more stealthy in the woods and go through the areas. I used to have tree stands that were big on my back, and it never dawned on me the clanking going through the woods until I started understanding deer a lot more. Deer, try to understand a deer. This might get a little deep, but hypothetically, if you went to bed at night and you woke up the next day and someone said they were going to put a hit on you and take you out, how would you walk around with that? So you got to think about how a deer is. A deer smells you when you're in the woods putting up a camera right now, and you haven't scented yourself off, or you just go in with cologne. He's already on, I promise you. My wife calls me anal, but she also says I have a horseshoe in my butt. So it's like, I'd rather, I weigh it out because I do those things. I hunt in Northern Virginia, and there's not a lot of land to hunt. I don't have property. I knock on doors, I ask for permission, and when I do get it, I can survey the land just from pretty much throwing up the signs, and then I'll set up on a deer like that. But I never ever go to a store before I hunt. All the boots in the back of my truck. I'm very particular about my safety truck and when. And if you're going in to harvest the animal, you really want to be as stealthy as you can. And this is my exact setup this year. I just got it in. I tried it. I could not believe I have a partial tear in my rotator cuff. And I went up the tree, and it takes me, I'm a little bit littler than Zach, it takes me 3 steps to get about 15 feet, but I don't like to go more than 15 feet. But I swung this off, and I swung this off my shoulder like this, and this is with it. It's 5.3 pounds, so I had to weigh it in the house. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. And the sturdiness of it. I'm so excited to use it this year because I like to go and move and go and move. So I would take, anybody, you take something out today, your health and fitness, first and foremost, because you don't want to get lazy and not go over that ridge after a buck. You want to be in shape, and then, of course, you all know how dragging it is. But, it's good in both ways, anything you do in life. If anybody wants to talk to me a little bit about how to stealthy hunt suburban areas, one trick I did, I got a token young last year, and I could not ever get this deer in daylight but every picture on my camera, so I nicknamed him Houdini. And I always had this nanny doe everybody had a nanny doe that picks them off all the time, right? No matter what, I go in no matter what, and you're like, really? So my granddad, my uncle taught me how to burn some leaves that are in the area and then put your clothes over, right? So that just a little bit, I said, let me try it. So I burned some leaves, let them bust out, put more leaves on it, put my clothes over, went in, and I'm hunting in between homes. There's 10-acre lots. They're burning fireplaces, right? So that nanny doe came by, and you could tell she was, that seems legit. And went on by, and soon enough, the next day I wound up getting shot on that deer. So I'm just saying, little things like that, adapting to your training, that tactic probably isn't going to work in Kansas, out in the big field. But it's the little things like that, learning and adapting. So if anybody wants to speak to me after that, let me see.
Everybody, I'm Zach Robb. I'm basically from right here. I live 15 minutes away. So this is home to me. I'm born and raised in this area. I'm sure, like most all you guys, you hunted at a summit in ladder stand. I can remember when I first got into bow hunting, I had a summit, and I was seeing a lot of deer. was staying mobile, I was moving around, always different spots, and I was just seeing a bunch of deer, but I was always hunting for a tree I could get it in, which kind of kept me out of the game. Then I kind of transitioned to, during rifle season, we'd go to ladder stands on fields and whatnot. I put a couple good deer on the wall using some lucky tactics, maybe during the rut. And after doing that, I really wanted to hone in on finding targets with the bow. Went back to that climber style, and I just was always just barely out of the game. So for me, I dove right into a hang and hunt setup, and actually my very first hunt with that, I killed. So that kind of clicked right away, and told me that I could start hunting deer and stop hunting for the right tree. So for me, the setup that I choose, especially during early season when it's really hot around here, is this little .5. I might look kind of silly on it, but it's all I need and nothing more. Only using 2 sticks. These guys kind of started talking me into it years ago, and nowadays, instead of like everybody else trying to get way high in the sky, I try to find some brush to kind of tuck myself in and stay a little low. It's more efficient, it's a lot lighter, and now that I'm hunting way up in the mountains, that's something I appreciate a lot. So, if you got any questions about hunting mountains or really local or hybrid style, I use the saddle as my harness as well. Just keep it low. I don't necessarily saddle hunt, but I like keeping it all minimal and especially being able to change layers, not have that feather coming off your neck. So that's it.
All right, guys. My name is Jacob. I am originally from Florida, but live in North Carolina now. Have for the last 6-7 years. I hunt all over the place. I'm very lucky to have a business that allows us to be content creatives in the outdoor industry, which sends me all over the country. So a lot of my hunting is 1-week gaps in different states. Last year I hunted 7 different states. This year it's going to be 6 or 7 different states again. Wherever work takes me is where I end up having to hunt. That's just the nature of the beast with my schedule. So I've had to work with guys like Cody and other people much more experienced than myself to learn and figure out how to be more effective on run and gun systems. I grew up in the southeast, but in Georgia, Florida, very much similar to how things are traditionally in probably the eastern side of Virginia. Much like Zach talked about, ladder stands, climbers, you name it, we did it the old-fashioned way. So I run just like a lot of these guys. I'm running 2 sticks. I'm ultra mobile, ultra efficient, trying to stay as light as possible to just minimize my profile and my presence in the woods. And then I'm active as much as I can possibly be and just getting as many sits in, hunting time, hunting hard, and trying to be effective on new ground all over the place. So very rarely do I actually get the chance to hunt somewhere that I have a lot of history with. Most everywhere I go, I've never been there before, with the exception of North Carolina. So if you have questions about hunting new ground, about hunting out of state, I'm happy to go ahead and help and talk to you guys a little bit more about that. Thank you.
I'm Cody DeQuisto. So I got a little different kind of start to the whole mobile hunting game, and I was fortunate in the fact that when I was very, very young, I was raised and I like kind of was just always subject to that super aggressive style of hunting. So for those of you who might not know, it was my old man that started lone wolf tree stands back in the day, way early in the 80s. So my first experience of a tree stand was like the best of the best, the lightest, the most mobile, if you would. And in a day and age where everything, I mean, there was your climbers and those guys were pretty portable, but in a day and age where there was a lot of fixed wooden ladder stands and stuff, the old man pioneered things by, the first really portable tree stand. Some of those older models like that. And not only that, but kind of birthed this style of like real go-get-em whitetail hunting. And so me coming up as a kid, 12, 13 years old, that's all I knew. So as I've developed as a hunter, I didn't have to find that. I knew it from the get-go, and it's been this constant pushing of the envelope to get more aggressive and push all sorts of boundaries. I was also fortunate to like, you know, see these industry trends and be able to call bullshit on them, like, you know, excessively hunting high, or like you can't hunt the mornings, or don't even bother in early season. You can't kill a big deer in October. Like a lot of these things, and it just didn't make sense to me. So, you know, camouflage. Oh, you need the best camo, or you need camo period. There's a lot of things that I just started, you know, messing around with. But I am a firm believer that the more efficient you can be, the more deer you're going to kill. Because of that, I take as little stuff as possible. Even when I'm filming, I try and minimize it. You know, my sticks, hunting low came from wanting to be quick for me. And then I realized I kind of got into, you know, I discovered something special there. Also, I went through the whole rigmarole, and me and Brian will probably butt heads on this for a little while today, but I went through the scent stuff. I started killing more deer more consistently when I stopped giving a hell about my scent so much. Not in the sense of playing the wind. The scent is the main line of defense for a whitetail, 100%. But where I think it gets overcomplicated, and one thing that Brian said that I absolutely loved, he talked about woodsmanship, and he talked about not overcomplicating hunting. And those two things, in today's day and age, I feel like everybody's trying to find the next gadget that makes it easier, when going back to the basics and understanding deer and their mannerisms and not overcomplicating things is at the heart how you're going to be most successful. And I believe there's some pitfalls there with scent. A deer's nose is its nose and eyes are, you know, its number one lines of defense, right? And I think it's crucial to play that wind. And that you should live and die by. Wind, thermals, all that. But where I think it gets overcomplicated is the scent control. And all these things start to tax you as the season goes on. So we'll get into this and some more advanced things about, okay, you know, scent control, you know, washing clothes, access routes, all those types of things. But if you want a deeper dive into like my philosophy on scent and hunting heights and stuff like that, we can dive into that later. But small hang-on stand, I believe is the most versatile unit you could have. My goal is to go out and not encounter a situation that I can't capitalize on. And you know, climbers are great, but sometimes the climber leaves you, you know, shit out of luck. Same thing with the saddle. Same thing with even being on the ground. Like, you know, sometimes you need that. If you have a stand on your back and you choose to sit on the ground, that's one thing. But if you need to get up in a tree and you can't, or you need to get in that pine tree or apple tree or hedge tree and you can't because you got a climber or because you got a saddle, like so. I'm all about being prepared for anything. So that's a little bit about me. And wrapping up our speakers now, we're going to dive right in. We're going to go round robin here, and we just want everybody to give us a little introduction. Your name, where you're from, right? Yep. We just want to get an idea of where everybody's coming from. Let's start over here at the end. I'm friends with some of the most ruthless killers there are out there, like most successful guys, and it shocked me. I would like be in situations like with Jake when he's running the buckles wrong, and I'd be like, Cody and
I don't agree on everything.
I had to throw no, but anyway, but
just because he kills good deer doesn't mean he's right.
In all seriousness, there's pitfalls that, you know, a guy might be using the gear and, you know, he might be happy with it, but it doesn't get as solid as I'd like it, or you know, this happens, or I had to kick out this one time, or those things should not be happening. So if they are happening, look into the procedure you're using and make sure you're doing it right. So especially for you guys looking to get into mobile hunting for the first time, using this stuff, avoid those pitfalls right off the bat. Especially social media, I see it all the time. I'll see posts of a tree stand, and I'll be like, who the hell hung that tree stand? And it's just like, oh my God. So with that, the biggest thing I see, and is pertaining to strap angle. You think that mind if I break it? If I can break it? Down.
Rubber. I can remove that if you need me.
I was about to tell you.
Get it.
Yeah.
He's like,
No, you big. Yeah, put on a belt.
hey, don't come on.
Come on.
You have to put those back, though.
Wow. Look at that. Yeah. Rushing in by David Miller.
I planned that specifically for Dave.
By Dave
For Dave to be able to do that. Okay, all the sticks, now, and we'll go over buckle lifts in a second, but the same principle applies to anything. If you're using a daisy chain, a cam strap with a buckle, a rope, the strap without the buckle, like there's literally endless ways to attach these. So it's very simple. One of the loop ends on the button or the tab, but when you come around the tree, this is where you got to make sure you're doing your diligence to make sure the strap is right. So this is what I see a lot. I see people put it on, and they're like, okay, there it is. Let me set it. Let me step on it. Like, so one thing to take into account, look at the angle of this belt. They start with such a severe angle that even though they're seating it, it feels solid. You're asking for, like, it's solid, but you're asking for it to kick out. There's just not enough. Look at all the, like, so these get solid regardless, but look at all the slack you have in it. That's a no-no, absolute no-no. So right when you start, always get in the habit of making sure that your belt is perpendicular to the stick. So make that line parallel to the ground. You want this as flush as possible. The belt as flush as possible, and then take all the slack out of it, all that you can. Then seat your stick, and then put your weight on and apply weight. That will not kick out, and it'll be as solid as you can possibly get it. The same goes for the compact style stick. If you're using this with the deployable steps, same goes for this. And the same thing too, if buckleless is even more important, because you cannot reef out the tension like you can with this buckle. So you're always going to end up with a little bit more of a significant angle than you will with this buckle. So for those of you new to hunting, I would recommend a buckle, hands down. It may seem appealing to save that 4.5 ounces. It's a world of ease when taking on and taking off the tree. And you can get used to the buckleless method, but
There was something that you did on the back side of the tree here that not everybody probably sees or knows to do.
Speak up.
I'm gonna flip it around. Hang on a sec. So what he did
Max spoke too loud.
was he yeah, there you go. Set off the alarm. He pulled it tight like that, but rather than leave it at that, he actually used that as leverage and got extra slack.
Well,
out.
that's the beauty of that buckle. That's a good point. You can leverage that buckle and get so much more, torque to tighten that stick down, and that's important. So making sure that angle is there. If that angle is correct, you won't have sticks kicking out, and you won't get that pendulum effect. That also amplifies. The longer the stick is, the more that can amplify that pendulum effect. It wasn't as solid as it needs to be, or it moves at the bottom, or when I put weight on it, it shouldn't be the case. So if you follow these simple instructions, that will not happen to you. So I like to, first off, I'll use the V of the stand, just to help me pass that belt around, so I'm not hurling a belt over and getting smacked in the face or something. I like to use that, but what you want to do is take your belt around with the stand in a closed position and kind of get it just sitting there, get it on its own, get the other end of your strap attached. Once it's in that position, then you can loosen the belt and move it to where you need it to be. I don't like any rolls in the belt. Keep it as flush. The flusher the belt and the more parallel, the more slack's going to come out of it and the more solid it'll be. So the more the angle, if you got the thing twisting 7 times, it's just not going to be optimal. So now I've found, where I want this stand. And this is where you're going to just kind of eyeball and make sure that it's flush. I like to use the front face of the stand and just give it a general eyeball. But Once it's in that position, in the closed position, the beam will be touching the tree. This is when you want to take all that slack, use that little method, take all that slack out of it, and then collapse the stand down. Naturally, the stand is gonna bite in. It'll be plenty solid right now. The secondary step to this, and this is even when, let's say you do put that down, just to go over a step, and you're like, it seems like it's leaning a little bit. Just pick it back up, move the bracket to where it needs to be, and put it back down, and now it's perfect.
But notice that belt is perpendicular to the ground, parallel to the.
Yep.
Just the same way.
And these brackets back here, they do not have to line up with the center of the tree. That's the beauty of these stands. They don't have to go there. You put that bracket, you know, other stands with a traditional like V bracket or something that doesn't look like ours, they're useless. And I'm not bashing. Well, I am bashing. They're useless because what they do is when you have a V bracket like that, all it does is gravitate to the sphere of the tree. And that's fine on a climbing stick, but not on a tree stand, because if our tree is crooked and we're to the center of that tree, you will be sitting on a crooked stand and it's gonna hurt the hell out of your back and you're not gonna last. So the concept behind this is that you can lift it and move it anywhere it needs to be. If this tree was crooked, you know, that would be straight. You understand the concept? So you put those teeth wherever they need to be to make it parallel.
You can run it on just one tooth if you need to.
And that's where, and you just eyeball where that needs to be, because you're on the tree, right? This is your gauge. This is always the best gauge. You can eyeball that. You can see if it's dipping down, dipping left. If you're somebody who needs to get up in the stand and try it, and you get up in there and you're like, it's a little crooked, you can always get back down and move it. But as a general rule of thumb, make sure that's nice and flat. Then you can mess with your leveling. You can, you know, change the pitch then. And okay, yeah, like that's where I want it, right? When you step into the stand for the first time, step in at the base right here. And once you're in the tree stand, this next step is what's gonna really shore it up and get it very, very, very tight. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the seat down, put our weight on the seat, lift up the platform a little bit, and what we're doing is changing the angle of that. We're allowing that bracket to dive down into that bark. Those teeth are sharp for a reason. They go and they work down. They work down into the tree. Now, when we cam this stand back down, what it's doing is it's grabbing every last little bit of slack out of that belt, and it's pulling it tight.
You guys couldn't see it, but like this bracket right here moved another 1.5 inches down.
It slid down, and then we squeezed all the slack out of that belt. A lot of guys, it seems to be not as popular back then, but I talked to guys, oh yeah, I just bought a ratchet and I put it on. Do not buy a ratchet strap. Don't put a ratchet strap on your hang-on, you don't need it. This, anybody who wants to come up here and feel this is tighter than a ratchet strap.
You'll see the stand even has 2 hooks for a belt. I actually at one point did run 2 belts to try to get it a little tighter, and found by running just a single strap and toe camming it like he did, kept it tighter than 2 straps.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
So now your top strap is so, it's as tight as it needs to be. It's so solid, right? If you're going to run a bottom strap, the important thing about running the bottom strap is if you repeat that exact same process, you could dislodge the top. So when you attach the bottom strap, you only need to do it like in a partial sense. So once I get up here we go. So if you're gonna run the bottom strap, and a lot of guys just like about it, it's an extra strap. It's another line of like safety, and they feel more comfortable. And also, this is one thing. This tree worked out perfect for this. When you have the weight on the stand, you don't notice this, but this little movement right here, people are like, oh, like what? You know, it's because the tree is bigger at the base and it's hitting on one point than the other. You can shore that out by putting on this bottom belt. And what you're gonna do is once it's completely set up and locked in, you run this strap around. Same concept. Back to the button. Now, okay, it's flush. I don't have any turns in it. I'm going to take all the slack I can. Now what you're going to want to do, you only have to lift it about 1 inch. And now make sure you're not unwedging this bracket. That's why you see I have my arm on here. I just lifted a couple inches, and that gives me just that just that another inch to take out of there. And now there's no movement on that bottom. So if you want a little extra stabilization, and a lot of times you don't need it, like as Garrett mentioned, it's not necessary, but if you're somebody who wants to run a bottom strap, for peace of mind, safety, do not recam it. Because a lot of the times, well, I run a bottom, or it doesn't get solid. I did what you did. I cammed it like you said. Well, if you cam the bottom strap, you can dislodge this. So don't cam it with the body. Does that make sense? And then you're 100% set up right there. If you're gonna set up a stand to leave it, 2 straps is always the way to go. Squirrels will annihilate things. You know, always inspect your straps. You don't want those things getting gnawed on if you're leaving something out in the timber.
The last thing I want to add too, just to reiterate, so everybody is sure. So when you saw Cody toe camming that stand in, just remember, you're only having to come up, you know, give or take a couple inches, 3 to 4 inches. Like we've seen guys at the shows come in, and all of a sudden they want to toe cam it, and they've got their weight up here, and they want to yank this thing all the way up, like kick it way up, and then push it down. You don't have to do that.
A good rule of thumb is lift it until you feel it start to settle. If you lift it slow, you're gonna feel that bracket just drop, and that's right where you need to be. You just want to get that little extra bite, and yeah, and it's not always necessary, but it's a good practice to do, and it just gets it very tight. So, all right, with that being said, I'm gonna take this stand off, and then we're gonna go over.
I like how you can give yourself
At this point,
I'm
ready to go down.
You know, you can put this down. You got camera gear and everything else. You can set it here and do what you gotta do to work.
Is it just that one rope back there?
Yeah, there's actually another one right there.
Be ready.
No, that's great.
If you got more than one arrow, you can shoot the right spot and the wolf. Same thing with the deer. Closest to the 10 ring. So you can shoot the wolf. Yep. If you got one arrow, start with a tight spot.
The Onyx one is where you want to see. You got one arrow.
Where you want to be.
I think I'm on.
Because the wolf, everybody shoots at the wolf.
What's 20 bucks? It's 20 bucks. I'll never have a chance shooting.
Let's do whoever's closest. Guys give you like $5 to shoot the wolf. Can't buddy. That's part of it. What if no one Yeah.
Because there's a little trash around it.
Yeah. I ain't letting that. I'll let it eat.
I'm going to let it eat. That's the whole critter. That's not the whole critter.
Oh, believe me, you just hate
That one's so unforgiving.
You just hate to hear it.
It's not. The wolf.
Does it matter where these ears hit, or just shoot it?
Yeah.
Does it matter where it goes?
As long as they're in the circle,
How do you know what
two they're off to like rock, paper, scissors.
Oh! Hey, that counts. That's in there.
You gotta get it back.
I ain't lying.
Got to.
That's the heat seeking. Put the heat seeking on out. Throw it right up in there.
Yeah, what kind of arrows you shooting over there? Oh, those are bats.
Yeah.
Front of victories. Hey, they didn't say what the qualifications was of being in the hole. It just said in the hole. Oh, yeah.
All right, you go.
We get really excited
I missed your shadow.
Let's go, baby. I said, get you some.
Yeah, I hope you missed it. I'm so sorry.
3 counties over here.
Wasting an arrow and didn't get it on film because I was too busy chit-chatting. One job. One job. Here's the yellow one. Yeah. How good you can see all that. Not real good. What's up, man? Drop on the orange one. I couldn't get it in the hole. Got it around the hole. Couldn't get it in the hole.
No, it's not that.
I believe my arrow's been shot in the hole.
Oh, see, it ain't even broke.
Mine closest to that. This is impressive. I'll tell you what.
It didn't break mine that
That
bad.
white arrow's got to be.
Where's that exit?
Right here, it's no better.
Somebody broke my arrow. So here's the thing.
I'm sorry.
Pull the box out. I want to see.
You talk about you're shooting straight.
Catch off.
She's in too. Well, you're supposed to gut shoot wolves. That's the actual canines in the guts right there.
Let them run off for now.
That's me.
What is that actually with the 3? That one there.
Have limited time, a real small piece. I'm going to really look at weather. I'm going to really look at wind. I'm going to really look at maybe even the moon. Use all these factors I can to try to pick the best day I can be in there to make it happen. Now, if I have limited time and I got some public land or something, I mean, I'll head straight from the truck if I can, and I'll look at the wind on the way and decide on the way. But I'll be a little more reckless going into public land because other people are as well, and I have a lot more ground to cover. If I have a small piece, I'm very careful about it because I don't want to burn it up, blow it out. And it's easy to do. I did it for many years, burnt my own pieces out and tried to hunt harder, and all I'm doing is making it worse.
Zach, you and Dave, both of you guys hunt a lot of private mountain land. So I know, knowing both of you, you both take a little bit of that approach as well about being diligent about when you go into hunt, right? You're both on that.
Yep. I mean, I have pretty limited time, so I try to make it as worth it as possible. So I'm like said, you know, I set like anywhere up to like maybe 6 cameras, and I'll troll for bucks in a sense on community scrapes, historic signposts, or just travel corridors, pinch points. And I'll try and find a target first, and then maybe set a couple cameras or a mock scrape. I really like mock scrapes and data points that you can put on an Excel sheet and kind of look at it and get a plan together. If I can create data points while I'm not there, that really helps me for a little bit of time that I do have while I am there.
That's great. You're the talk on trail camera life.
Yeah.
It's great for you to pick up on, right?
Yeah. What I was going to say ties into both of these guys. I'll stay out of the woods as much as you can, so that immediately saves you time. And use that time. You try to put as many cameras out as you can in the area you're wanting to. Start out this way though. Start out looking at the big picture. Spread your cameras out thin. Then locate and identify, okay, there's a good deer here, there's a good deer here, there's a good deer. Spread them out really wide in the early season. Then pick the deer you want to hunt. Then centralize those cameras into the area you're going to hunt. Now, that takes time in the field, a little bit to do that, but the majority of the time I spend is on maps. And I do that at nighttime when the families are bedding down. I'll take an extra hour every night and I'll study my maps. And I'll put extra pins. Oh, what if he's coming from here and going there? What if he's bedding here? I create scenarios, like within my head, you know, based off of what I've seen in the field. And then I don't hunt unless I really feel I'm going to go in there and shoot that deer.
And to be clear too, when you're saying like don't go in the woods, I think it's important to specify. You mean like don't go into the woods to hunt unless you know he's there. You spend a lot of time scouting.
Go scout somewhere else. If I know a deer, yes, that's very good. If I know a deer is in an area and I'm wanting to hunt him, I'll let my cameras be my eyes. And if he's not patterning in an area, I don't tromp around in there and just try to put a bunch of scent and a bunch of my presence there. I go scout other areas to give myself a secondary option, because options is how you do it consistently. Like you can kill one buck every so often, so many years, but to do it consistent, you got to have keep working options to gain options different places. And that's the thing, you don't have to have all these hours and hours and hours to be out in the woods hunting all the time, because it's better to be patient and wait for the right time and spend the right time in the woods.
I think the thing to take away from that is it's purposeful time. I'll come to the question in a second. It's purposeful.
When's the last time you scouted before you go in?
What's that?
When's the last time you scouted before you go in to hunt or set cameras up, paint stands, build scope?
I usually that's the whole reason that my style of hunting, why mobile hunting is it, because I try not to go hang a set. I try to be set up where I can just go in on my back and just hunt at that moment whenever it's time. That's why I try to go with cell cameras in the areas I'm going to be hunting, because it keeps me out of. I have went in and checked cameras, and I've been like, okay, this buck is coming through and moving. I've seen during storm fronts when certain deer will be through certain areas just during storm fronts, and so I know one guy that he called the deer storm he killed because it would only be in this field during the storm, right before storm. He waited till the next front. He went out and killed a 180-inch buck in Ohio.
I think something to remember there, to note there too, is like, I think some of those, I don't know whether your questions are coming from this thought process or not, but there's a conventional way of thinking that says you got to do all your scouting and get everything done in the summertime. But the problem with that is the whitetail woods are ever changing. Just like literally the wind is blowing leaves differently every time it changes directions. It's the exact same way in the woods. So what you scout in the summer is not going to mean anything even a week later. They could be totally different. If me and Dave hunt the same piece of property and Dave sees the deer I do and I don't know about it, he goes in to hunt those deer on the same scouting intel we both have, he's going to change their habits. So then I have to continue to scout. So you're scouting all the time. You're never not scouting.
Yeah. What I'll usually do, that's good. I think where you're going there. So basically what I'll do is I will have a mix of cell cameras and just point and shoot cameras. Whenever I find a deer I'm really going to hunt, I'm the kind of guy I go hunt. I'm targeting a specific animal, one deer. That's all I'm after. So I'll go into an area and I will take out all of those. I'll take out all of those point and shoots and I'll replace them with all my cell cameras. And I'll focus them right there so I can stay completely out of that area. So your answer is, I don't go back. Once I put those cameras out, I don't go back. I completely stay out until I see that buck 2 days in a row. If I see him at like 2 days in a row come to there, the next day I will be in there hunting.
And I think there's a thought process that goes along with camera usage, and I want to segue into everybody's thoughts on cameras. But one of the things that I know Dave does is Dave doesn't. He's not always. He may be running a camera in a given area, but he's not always hunting over the camera. So, for example, he may be looking at. He may know, hey, I'm running a camera on this bench that's running around this ridge, and he knows the buck is likely going to cross here, and he's going to bedding.
Yeah, I look at the direction he's coming from.
Yeah, and then he'll set up somewhere between where the camera is and where that buck's going.
I look at the time, look at the timing, and that's where knowing that area, going in kind of early season, or really going in January, February, March and scouting, and learning the terrain where you can see it really good. Learn that terrain, that way you don't have to go back in there. That way the next year you're like, okay, that buck's over here on this point where I got this camera, but he didn't come there until 30 minutes after dark. So I know for my scouting, there's a bench that goes around this bowl. He came from that way. If I set up on that bench over here on the other side of the valley, I bet I can get him.
I guess my thing is like, you know, your batteries have to die. Like, you change it and put it in, keep your scent. Or do you?
I think you're thinking too far into it. Like if the battery's died, you're just gonna go change batteries.
Yeah. And running, honestly, where I hunt, I usually set them on like a 30 second or 1 minute PIR interval, and usually most cameras last me like 4 to 6 months. Usually.
So
yeah.
And I want to hear everybody's thoughts on this. Is like so let's step away from trail cameras for a second. So for each of you guys, starting again with you, Garrett, like what are things you're keying in on if you go to a piece of property and you don't have any trail camera information, you don't have any data that you can go off of that says there's a shooter in the area? Like what are you looking for, and then how would you hunt if you didn't have access to trail camera?
First, like Dave said, I'm going to look at my map. I'm going to look at the maps, then I identify any food sources. If I can identify food sources, I'm going to search around it. Do I find any saddles, in ridge, things like that, terrain features that are going to funnel, and really just getting in and looking for what is the food source right now, or where are they bedding right now, and I want to know what right now. A lot of times trail cameras told me last week if they're not cell cameras, things like that. So yeah, I'm going to go in and say, okay, this time of year, I think they're looking for this type of food source. Can I identify that on a map? I have this type of wind. Can I find bedding that's good for that type of wind? And then I'm going to try to find fresh, find hot sign and hunt it and see what's there.
Any questions so far? Any thoughts?
Well, one of the things I find, what's the buck trying to do? Get does.
Social spot.
What are the does trying to do? Eat. So your food source is constantly changing. And another reason I like hunting hills is I can identify bedding way easier. With wind direction, they use the terrain to their advantage. They are not going to bed in a place where the terrain is against them. Flat ground, you can find they'll just bed there, whatever. But yeah, they're constantly changing food source, so I'm always trying to find what are they on to next. And if you have a small piece of property, you know, micro, even 5, 10 acres, whatever, if you don't have the food source and they're not coming through there, what's your point in hunting right now? You're just going to screw yourself up for when it could be right.
Yeah. So with the mass drop of the Virginia being so critical to where the deer come to feed, how do we deal with the year when it's light? How do we deal with the year when it's heavy?
Back summer day.
Yeah, how do you change your tactics?
Somewhere, I found on the piece that I was hunting on a really light year, there was a spot that was heavy, and they were all, I mean, the sign was like, it was like a barnyard. I mean, there was footprints everywhere, and all the sign was fresh. But you just got to keep moving until you find confidence, if nothing else.
They don't disappear.
Yeah, they're there.
They're somewhere.
They're eating something. They can eat bark and survive. But, I mean, really just staying mobile and finding the fresh sign, and then trying to make a note of it and think about why it's there. Is really the most helpful thing you can do. Is just think about the why.
But finding scrapes near feed areas too, where you can tell he's there and he's got a little bit of an attitude while he's checking, let you know he's probably doesn't care about the food. It's probably the does at that food, so that food source or that area or that close bedding is probably great.
I think something to remember too is like it's easy. I think it's easy like when we talk about like just identifying stuff. At least for me, something that has always helped me is the realization of just how significant that is that we're talking about. All these guys, myself included, Cody included, burnt boot rubber, constant, like running through pairs of boots. I go through a pair of boots every year or two at least. And it's because we're walking so hard that I've literally worn the bottoms off my rubber boots, like the bottoms just falling off after the year. So, and that's because you're identifying new signs, new areas.
It's something to help in that scenario during low mass years. I'll go back to maps again. Learning the areas where you know the deer will probably be using, like from the map, then going out in the field, you don't have to cover 200 acres, right? The thing is, you can learn on the map, okay, if there's a good deer in here, he should be here, here, or here. Just go to those 3 spots. That way you're not blowing him out of the area. Just go to those 3 like main points coming into a field. Look for those, I thought of that when you said those scrapes. Look for those big scrapes in the areas facing off of the map where you think that it'll be. That way you don't unnecessarily break.
Another good point on that topic, like years, or you're not sure where the food is, or just say they're really browsing all over, that's when I may look and be on landscape features, creek crossing, a saddle, any type of pinch. Because from year to year, day to day, they got to use that terrain feature in the same way. So I say sometimes they just sit in the same pinch every year during the rut, and they know bucks are going to cruise through that pinch at some point.
One of the things that they just addressed, they might not have been clear on, is somebody asked a question earlier, choosing a spot on a giant property. I don't know who asked that question, but somebody brought that up. That's exactly what they're talking about. And like what Dave and Garrett both touched on right there is their ability to identify that they may have 1,000 or a 2,000 or a 5,000 acre property, but there may only be 3 spots where they can kill a good buck on that property. If they know about them, they can hunt them at their time when they know they're there, whether it's through trail camera intel, through going and checking them intermittently until the sign pops up, and then they can be strategic about that strike. You know, but that's a good answer to that question that got asked is just that. That's how they're identifying. It's through that boots on the ground scouting and their knowledge of the area, whether it's pre-season or during season, that lets them say, I'm not hunting 1,000 acres, I'm hunting 3 different spots that are collectively 2 or 5 acres. All right, so next thing here that I think would be, who has issues with swirling wind in the hills? All right, so everybody pretty much. Even if you didn't raise your hand, I'm gonna tell you you're a liar. So each of you kind of go through how you approach your setups as it relates to swirling winds and like how you predominantly hunt with wind direction in the hills to avoid it.
Well, for me, I'm more in a suburban area, so my wind's always changing. I've learned over the years, first of all, wind is key. You can only master your sense so much. So I try to do every effort I can, like I mentioned before. From my clothes never go in a dryer. It's just the little things I do. I hang my clothes outside. I do everything I know I possibly can do, but still, if you have a swirling wind, it's not much more you can do from that. So I typically try to know when that area, depending on the buck I'm after, I try to typically go on a good wind. However, in 2019, while we're always learning, I went out and I think I mentioned to the guys, I killed my best buck on a bad swirly wind because my wife got all over me because I didn't go hunting. She said, why didn't you go hunting? I can only hunt Saturdays and Sundays because of my job. And I said, because my wind app says the wind is coming in a certain way. She said, you're what? You were saying, I don't know anything about that. It never stopped me before, so I got upset. And I said, I'm just going. And the wind did this, and it went the wrong way, and I was upset, but I didn't know. It was October 19th, and the doe was coming to me, and he was coming from a different direction. So I think it has to do a lot with trying your best to hunt on a good wind, but also not being afraid to hunt, have confidence. So I wound up getting that deer that I was after on a bad one, because they're unpredictable. But just when you think you have them predicted, that's what I would do.
Hill hunting, I find they get most wind swirls with light wind or variable wind. Some of my best properties, and it's funny, we just thought about this with a buddy. He said, it's only every few years we kill a good buck there. And we started talking about exactly this, a steady wind, good wind. Sometimes, 10 to 15 steady going, that's going to keep it from swirling. Another thing is if you have swirling winds and you know you're going to just have to deal with swirling winds, what's your thermals then? Then go to your thermals. At least a lot of times your thermals are going to overpower winds. So if you're going to have variable winds, make sure you have the thermals working in your favor because that can even overpower the variable. The other thing is while you're in your stand and in your locations is wind mapping. I have one of the little lone wolf indicators that has a powder in it that I use while I'm walking to the stand in general direction. But while I'm in my tree, I'm dropping milkweed. Because I may even know, all right, I got this straight 15 yards and the wind's good. Well, if it's variable or the thermals change and I'm dropping and now my wind's going to that straight, I can't wait for that buck to get to that straight. Now I have to shoot it before he gets there because my wind is changing. One one of the spots I hunt, you get in the tree and you think your wind's going to continue right down over the stream, I'm bulletproof. Deer would come out on the other end of the field and bust me every single time. Didn't understand why till I started using that milkweed. And it would go down and it would follow the edge of the woods like that, like your scent hit a race car track. And go right down the end instead of over that creek in that bluff. So being in an area, mapping your wind, seeing what it's doing will help with variable winds. Playing your thermals will help overpower variable winds. And hunting a decent, strong wind will help with variable.
We're going to talk a little bit more. We're just going to touch on thermals here in a little bit for everybody. But then I know, Dave, you're big on hunting off the ends of points.
Yes.
Right?
That was all I was going to say. Mine will be short. Listen, try to stay away from valleys and bowls and deep hollows. Try to find points. Try to find points and ridges. So basically, most of the time, you know, you're factoring on a west or southwest or south wind. Usually, I will try to find a point shooting off where I can get on the off side, and it will blow my scent off into a valley, and so the deer can come around the point by me and from any angle, and he will never pick me off if I use points and ridges. Use points and ridges. Using that terrain will save your life the majority of the time.
So for example,
if that's where the deer use it. If not, you may have to come off a point, but pick the point that you can get your wind right.
A good visual example for everybody to talk about, just so that you know what Dave's preference is. So everybody knows what a horseshoe looks like. So let's just pretend there's a horseshoe in the air like this, and there's big. It goes up into a valley, right? It's going up like this, you know, pop, and then that horseshoe turns to create ridges that come out. So it's a big horseshoe upside down, and then goes out. Dave would be hunting off those points on the bottom of the horseshoe, more off the very top of that horseshoe, right, Dave? Yeah. Because it swirls where it's kicking back and forth inside that valley or off of the faces.
Because here's something else, and this ties into what you were saying. You know, you try to always play the prevailing wind, but here's the good thing. If you get off of one of these points coming off the hill, like here's a ridge, and there's a point dropping off, and then it flattens off, and play the prevailing wind to your favor. But here's the thing. If you've got thermals coming up the hill on one side, thermals coming up the hill on the other side, I've seen it many times. They'll come up and meet and take your scent straight up in the air. You're good. From both sides of the point.
So if you guys are like, you know, if you set up and say you've been in the stand for an hour, 2 hours, whatever, and when you got there, wind was great, right? And then all of a sudden, things start to swirl up on you, things start to get weird with the wind. Do you ever just go ahead, get down and try to get into a new location, or do you just try to stick it out?
I'd say that depends on your confidence and where they're coming from, too. Like, if you know they're coming on that trail,
that's the
then you need to move. But if you have no idea, you're just in a good spot, then maybe, you know, you're observing at that point.
If I think it shifts and it's going to his bedroom, he's going to be coming from, I'm out. I leave immediately. Yeah, because that'll happen at the edge of dark. Have you seen that happen? Right at the edge of dark, everything can be going good, and then the sun sets behind the hill, the prevailing almost shuts down, and then it's all thermal going down straight below you. And that has killed me several times. Yeah. So you gotta always find it.
Do you, does it help you a little bit to be like 3/4 of the way up off that point, as far as wind goes?
Yeah, be right on the point.
Yeah.
Like allow your scent, get on the side of the point that would allow your scent to go out and over into the valley.
Like more the upper 3/4 of it.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you. Yeah. Just the first third off of the hill, off of the ridge. If you can't be on the ridge and they're using on the ridge, leaves have fallen, they're off that ridge for protection.
Yeah.
Come to the first flat, a third off the mountain. Yeah. That's a good time.
That's where you get a lot of your best thermal mixing is about a third of the way down. The thermals come up, and the wind comes over the hill, and it makes a little tumble zone. And you'll find, when you find that elevation, you know, if you go walking this ridge on this side, and you find, man, right here at 1400, I'm finding all kinds of beds, all kinds of scrapes. If you walk all the way around and come down the ridge on this side, I bet you somewhere around that 1,400 foot elevation is where you're going to find most of your activity again, because that happens to be where you're getting the best mixing if the thermal's rising, the wind's coming over top, and then just sitting there kind of.
And they use that to their advantage.
Absolutely.
They know that
Absolutely.
better than we do.
I was just about to say that's a key thing to note for like as far as the level at which bucks will prefer to bed on a specific spot.
Yeah.
Is if you're think about that intersect point for a morning. So most of they'll bed shift during the day, but I usually attribute where they're bedding based on where they go back to in the morning, and then they'll bed shift in a small area unless there's a real crazy wind. So what they're doing is they're following that thermal rise up in the morning with spots where that wind is crested over the top of that ridge, and then they're at that intersect point where they can smell everything below them and also everything behind them. That's why a lot of guys, and Dave included, hunt path that travels right to left, correct, Dave? Versus up and down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a lot of it's situational too, like we talked about. You can notice how the deer are reacting to that wind and you, the first batch that comes through, or a doe, or however, and you can read their mannerisms to let you know if you should stay or not. That question over there. If all of a sudden she's like, you probably want to go. It's probably time to go. But if she's kind of just something's wrong, but I'm still cool. Chances are, and you're hunting big buck, I'd stay put. Or they can't quite figure you out and get down.
That's where keeping that milkweed, and that's huge, is knowing where you can't let them cross.
You guys, has everybody used milkweed, or do you know what milkweed is? Does anybody not use it? Raise your hand if you don't use anything like that. If you don't use it, you can use. I actually prefer the softer. If you've got like Q-tips in your house, you can strip the fine cotton off those Q-tips, and it'll work better than traditional cotton balls because it's so much softer and finer. So you can strip that off and then use that for milkweed in a pinch. That'll do that. But it's the thought process to help those of you who aren't used to understand it. That will carry longer, so the guys can see it. So instead of just your puffer, you puffing it and you see a general direction, it may carry down 60 yards, and then they watch it whip around out in front of them. So this is a white dot floating through the woods.
Let me give you one more really cool tip. If you're allowed to, like in the National Forest you're at, if you're allowed to cut dead stuff, or cut dead stuff that's already laying, or if you're on private and you want to cut something that's alive, you're on private ground. What I do is if I have a place that I'm going to be hunting year after year, if there's an area, like if there's a tree, and I'm like, this tree is perfect except for when deer come over here, I will make a fence out of dead stuff. I mean, just pile the nastiest, gnarliest stuff where deer cannot pass through and force them to not be able to go through that wind bank.
It can be as easy as just moving a big limb or just making them walk around.
Yeah, do 4 or 5 limbs, make it look like that. Yeah, trust me, that works. If you have a favorite spot, do not allow them into the place where they're going to pick you up.
All right. So, ignore me if I step away and convene with Bob over there. So, anyways, all right. Curious. One of the other questions that we had here that I think is good is, how do you guys know a buck is in a specific location? So, like, once again, we're assuming no trail camera data here. How do you know, like, what are the key things that are tipping you off to a buck being there that you want to hunt? And I'll take that a step further and say, how do you identify, like, what's the key identifier for you that signifies that it's a buck of the caliber you want? So, whoever wants to start.
I can start with that. I didn't use the cell camera still for me. I'm old school. And it was always for me is when I was in an area or I scouted an area and I saw a cedar tree about this big around. Obviously, it's like ding, 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 ding. But that's always good, number one. Number two, you can tell a lot of times when trees are snapped, the size of the footprints, the size of the droppings, right? So if you got a big wad of droppings and you see a big, heavy footprint, you know something's coming through there, or the area you're hunting is known for big, large deer. And then once you see that rub, there's a lot of things to tell you about that rub. You got to kind of look at what side the rub's on. Is he making his line? And how to hunt it, not right on it. You need to hunt off of it. And I'll just share a quick story of a deer. I got permission by knocking on doors. I knocked on 14 doors, and they all said no, and I was about to drive by the last house. I was deflated. So nobody's going to let me hunt. One guy was standing out of his mailbox, and I said, you know, what the heck? I said, sir, do you mind if I... He goes, yeah, come on up to the house. Because I knew the farms that were around this place. He said, son, I don't mind. Take a look out back. And I walked out back, and I found a cedar tree just ripped. And I was like... Yes. Bow hunted. Yes, sir. It takes a lot of want to, so it's not for everybody, especially in today's day. Back in the 80s, it was a little easier, like, come on in. Now today, they're like, what the hell you want? So,
you have a 3-year-old daughter. Bring her.
I always approach, my approach is very humble. I'm a humble person anyway, but I have a business card. And I said, excuse me, hi, I'm in the area, I'm looking for a place to bow hunt. Would you mind if I can bow hunt on the property? It's either going to be yes or no or maybe, and maybes get my card. And I'll circle back, and they'll call me sometimes. I've got permission that way. And I have to follow back the following year, which I got some of my best properties that way. Because the owner of that property said, right now I have people hunt, but if somebody ever drops out, I'll let you know. I came back and said, yeah, I'm going to call you, you can hunt. And I wound up killing 3 deer, 140 claps off of that property. I never would have if I did not.
A big factor he just mentioned, I don't even know if you realize this, when you go door knocking, you don't say, hey, can I come hunt? First thing they're going to think is some person I don't know with a gun outside. No. Would you consider allowing someone to bow hunt? People that may immediately shut down with hunting, if you say, would you allow someone to bow hunt? They'll rethink about it. Okay, it's not someone I don't know with a gun out back of my house. It's just phrasing it with bow hunting, you will get much more responsive people. People even interested, wow, you really hunt with a bow? You know, and that starts conversation. But definitely go with bow.
And that does go a long way.
Does anybody here work in sales? Anybody work in sales here, Graham? All right, so my sales guys here will know what I'm talking about. So if you're going to go sell, if you're selling to somebody, for those of you who are getting sold to, which apparently is everybody in the audience, a good salesman will not ask you yes or no questions. They'll ask you questions that make you talk. So instead of being like, hey, do you drink energy drinks? Well, the answer is yes or no. Instead of asking that, that person might be like, hey, how often are you tired on a regular basis in the afternoon? You're like, well, as a matter of fact, I am tired most of the time around 3 p.m. That start of that conversation gets them talking. Those people, they don't know you. So you want to make sure you're asking. I always refer to them as, you got red light, yellow light, green light questions. So your green light questions are questions that are building relationships, they're building conversations, and they're forcing them to open up. Now, they're not always questions that are going to give you answers right off the bat, but it's going to allow you to build a rapport with that person so that hopefully you can get to that yes/no question to define the line that is, can I hunt or can I not hunt? You just can't go at that right out of the gate. You know, we've all probably walked up and talked to somebody in a bar. You build a relationship with somebody, you ask questions, you learn about who they are, that's the way they can work. You don't just walk up and you're not super abrasive, that's a quick way to get shut down. So the same thing goes along with, the same thing goes into asking for property permission. You know?
A lot of times, yes, ma'am.
You read down your areas, what kind of property they have,
Absolutely. So where I live, I've done that my whole life because I was at in high school that had to be. I've heard a lot of people talk. Over the years, those properties have always done good deer. And I've always remembered that. And then whenever things change in life, life's always going to change and we have to always adapt, right? So properties are going to get sold. Like I lost my property, the owner died, he sold it to his brother, he was no good, whatever. So I went all around that property. So those kind of areas, we all have our favorite areas. We kind of try to keep to ourselves nowadays. But those areas, I know where big bucks are, or they should be because they're coming off big farms or side fields. Side farms or beans. I've had most of my luck in 10 acres. Little spots, believe it or not. I mean, where they funnel to me off these big farms. So if I can get a property with 10 acres, the neighbor that has 10 acres doesn't hunt, the following neighbor doesn't hunt, and I'm just kind of in there by myself, is where you can find, and I think we've all had that happen in suburban areas where you can have that happen. So going back to this particular hunt, I hunted that deer all through all through bow season, and every time I didn't have cameras. So, he would have another rub somewhere else, but I knew his core area was good. I went through first day of muzzleloader with a drag rag. I don't know if anybody's ever done a drag rag. So that was before synthetic urine now it was real urine. And if you ever do a drag rag, always, this is what I've learned, every 50 yards or so, put some more on it. Because if the deer is going to cross that, he's going to go to the strongest point to try to follow. You don't want him going back to the truck. So, and then if you're heading to your stand, you don't want to head right to your stand. You want to veer off. You want to veer off about 50 yards, wherever you're comfortable shooting, and go that way, hang it about, foot off the ground or so he's getting that scent. And I kid you not. Now, I have done that a lot of times, and it's only worked twice. But one of them's on my wall. So it's kind of worth the effort. And that was the 15th guy I knocked on the door. So that was 2. But I did shoot that deer. He scored 144. I got him first day of mobile and followed back.
Back to the question of identifying if it's a big deer or not. Tracks. Tracks are it. I have watched really big deer make little teeny scrapes and rub up little strokes. And I've watched forkhorns try to manhandle big shit and scrape a car hood because they're just sniffing and fired up and they're just going to town. The track is going to let you know how big that deer is. And I can't tell you how many times I'm like, oh man, here's a fresh scrape, here's some rubs. I know a buck is here. I know he's probably bedding around here, and I'll hunt it. So I'll see the buck. Now I know. That's how you know. You see it, right? If I get in that spot and I see the buck, it's not one I want to shoot, but I could have. To me, that's a win. I identified the sign. I got in position where I could have killed him. It's not the one I want. Moving on to the next. But looking at the track until I can get my eyes on him, that's really the only way, in my opinion, you can tell if it's a big deer.
Now remember too, real quick, for those of you guys who, I know we have everybody here is for the most part East Coast guys, East Coast hunters or ladies, and I think that something to remember too, if you travel to the Midwest, so one of the things to remember is that oftentimes is that which I hunt this by the same creed that Garrett does with that. But when I go to the Midwest, their body sizes are so different, you can't apply the same principles. Like we have a really wide variety in our deer size here on the East Coast. We have does that are 90 pounds, and a mature buck would be 180, 200, 220, 230. Like in Illinois or in Iowa or Minnesota or Wisconsin, you might have a 2.5-year-old that's 190 pounds. So you got to be aware of like the caliber of like the body size deer you have in your given area, and then just what you're so for here and for probably all of us here, that's going to be a really good creed to live by. But don't be afraid to think a little outside the box if you go on a Midwest trip. Make sure you do your due diligence when you're looking at that 3 or 4 finger track in Illinois or Iowa or wherever you are, and say, okay, let me slow down for a second. Let me think about the things about that track that might justify it actually being an old deer. Like, are his toes real pointed or are they worn way down? You know, because maybe they all have 4-finger tracks. Maybe you're seeing 4-finger tracks everywhere. And to a little humble guy from East Coast, North Carolina, you're a little overwhelmed. At least I was. So
I second that. I mean, that deer over there is an Ohio deer, and that's a Virginia deer. That deer over there dressed out at 241 pounds. That thing was the biggest thing I ever seen in my life. It looked like an Angus. I about fell out of my tree stand. I got a 10-yard shot on it. Took everything I had to put my bow back on the table. But that's why we do what we do. Just to live for that moment. That's the first time I've ever said hunting. That's a hunt.
Yep.
And it was like standing 15 yards with a deer underneath them, you stomping the ground. And my heart was going through my chest.
Any specifics on Zach, you or Dave?
Yeah, I mean,
I get pretty damn excited if I see a big rub. I mean, I know a spike can do it. You know what? I got 3 tags. Screw that spike. No, if it's a deep gouge and you can kind of like visibly see the brow tine width, or you can kind of imagine what's going on with it, that's going to get me excited. Again, tracks, but that's going to let me know I need to put a camera or observance in, try and figure out what's doing it.
I'm going to interject for a second too. Also, characteristics of the rub. Did you say that?
Like depth.
That's I know Dave.
Like, well, like, because you can identify when there's weight behind that, and when it's pushing hard. Height of a rub is something you can't fake with you know, or a big one can rub low, but usually it's tough for the small ones to do an aggressive rub high. The type of tree, if it's a really hard tree, I mean, like, yeah, a smaller buck can. I got a story where I was hunting a cedar thicket, and I was convinced it was just magnum. It was just these giant cedar trees. Now, cedars are soft though. Super soft, super easy to scrape up, super easy to rub, right? So, I mean, there's piles of bark under these trees. And just, they are shredded 360. You know, now, ended up hunting that, you know, and the deer wasn't what I was looking for. And like Garrett said, it was 100% success, and I moved on. But like looking back at it, well, they're soft trees, like it's easy to look impressive, but a hard tree, like inch deep grooves in a maple, like at your chest, there's no doubt that it's a freaking hammer. Like it's like, you know, so one thing to think about.
So I find massive rows straight, and then I don't see much less kill it. I'll just see
Where you're finding it?
Yeah, that's the one I want. So I hunt a lot around the land, so it's on one side.
Are you hunting like, are they like kind of down in like holes, kind of down like bottom?
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask. If it's access, not like going out the area.
Man, you can't fit in an XL. You can't fit in an XL.
You know, if it's real, maybe you feel comfortable cruising there, but what I would do is if you're finding that sign, especially if it's open terrain, alright, you know there's a good one that's cruising through. Like, where would he be cruising or coming from? Where would he be bedding? Look for that thicker shit where they may kill during the day, or, you know, move from bed to just bed, or it's like, if they're you're probably not going to find a big dog just walking through, making big scrapes in open woods.
Well, and you got different types of signs too. So remember, your rubs can mean a lot of people, they just look at rub and it's just like, oh, this is a rub. Well, different rubs mean different things. You got a buck with a hot doe, and he's laying down rubs for 3 miles as he follows her. And then you got 4 bedding rubs, and then you got rubs that lead up into bedding, and then you got rubs in feeding areas. There's all sorts of things. So you got to interpret, you know, are you on a big travel path, or is it, are those rubs on November 7th, and the rubs that you're following, there's just a string of them through wide open hardwoods for 800 yards, and you're like, well, he's got to be coming through here. Well, he may never be there ever again. He may just be with a hot doe. You know, that was like, I credit to Cody, he taught me that, because I was hunting buck just like that, where I was finding signs every day, and he was just zipping around with hot does on this piece of public every night, and he would leave all this string of signs, and it would lead to nowhere. You know, but he was just fired up chasing does, and he had no purpose. You had to actually look at that and go, okay, he's here, but then get in and actually scout the property and identify where his pockets were.
And in that situation, it sucks because typically they'll do that when they got a doe pinned down and they're waiting. There's that period of time where like the doe's not quite ready, but they ain't letting anybody get in between them. Yeah, and I mean like they're pissed off. Their testosterone's running high, and they'll shred an area, and it'll look like a deer's consistently going in there, but it's really not. And odds are, by the time you get there, you're too late. So like I never spend any time in those areas. Now, if you got in there, you know, and put them on their feet, I would hunt it for sure right off the bat. But finding those areas like a day, 2, 3 days late, you're just too late. Like the odds of them being back there, like he pushed her in there, ripped everything up because she was in there and he was waiting on her, and now he's gone. Now he's most of, you know, odds are most of the time.
And that depends a lot on too what time of year. Like if it's during the rut, if that's happening earlier in the season, your chances of patterning a big buck are a lot better.
Oh yeah.
And this is what I'll do a lot of times. If I find a big scrape line, I will wait until a big storm comes through, blows a bunch of leaves and fills up all those scrapes, and I'll be in there the next day when he comes to clean them out. Yeah, that happens. But I think they answered, all of you guys answered that question awesome. Here's one thing I could add. Compile all of that data in your mind or grab your phone. This is what I always do. Every time I see a good size piece of sign, drop it on a pen. It's like putting a puzzle together. Within a few times scouting, being out in the woods, you'll be like,
you're using OnX or a solution like it?
Yeah. So what you'll do, you'll get to the point where you don't feel pressured to hunt over the sign. You'll look at the map holistically and you'll be like, oh, there's a huge scrape line along this ridge. Maybe I can hunt this end or that end rather than just hunting the first place I saw the sign. Branch out a little bit, look for more sign, and then that gives you options to try to pattern.
I'll keep it quick, but I did that on a piece of public. I actually went in from multiple access points, and I was putting pins where I was finding grubs. And then when I looked at the whole thing, I said, oh shit, I see it's a mile-long grub, and they're going from this farm and this ag to that one. But I would have never known if I hadn't gone to all three sections and seen it.
And that cut out 90% of the guesswork where the buck could have been. That could have been a 500-acre piece, and he just narrowed it down to a quarter mile.
It goes back to that question we talked about earlier. Remember, the same thing of like narrowing down that property. Most of those years, like it's the 90-10 rule applies to a lot of things in life. Like 90% of the year, you're going to use 10% of the property. You know, same thing with like 10% of your hunters are going to kill 90% of the deer. You know, it's that because it's like thinking through that. We got
in the same vein of location, with a state like Virginia has a super late opening, like this year about 2%. How do you go from all the summertime scouting, finding the big deer, and then that short window of when the bucks busted back to groups, talking about relocate? What's that time frame in between mid-September and that opening looks like? What's your thoughts on that?
Personally, I really hone in on that September window and capitalize on it. I mean, really. After that, you may have an idea of where he was, but if you're moving around, you got to move with it. So, I mean, I found I can correlate data from like the last article that I'll do, and I was telling him, I don't even worry too much about the cameras. I put cameras out last August. I didn't have it every year. September 4th comes around, and I got 6 years. Like, so there they are. And so I'll lay that out, and typically one of them will pick something. I'll do one last article and have something go each one, and then I'm constantly moving with them and taking the camera and taking the data when I'm not there.
I can relate to that too because of my job, like for example, I wouldn't get to hunt Virginia or my home state, North Carolina, until November this year. So any intel that I get right now means nothing. So I'm actually, if I am hanging any cameras, I'm hanging them in anticipation of movement for November and in December. I'm looking already. I'm not even trying to think about now, and it means I'm putting cameras out with nothing on camera, but I'm using the historic information that I have. Chris, my cameraman right here, is one of my hunt buddies. He actually was just with me. We went and hung some cameras in spots that I know I won't get a picture of a buck on until November. Like, but he'll be in there hard, remember? And that's the thing, is you got to think further out if that's your window to hunt. And I think your scouting plays a role in that. So if you can't guarantee that the bucks are going to be where they are right now because your season opener is late, like Cody always says, why are you even in the woods? Like, let them have it.
Yeah, you made a great point because you're hunting one deer, but it's 3 different animals. You know, with velvet, without velvet, and rough. That's right. All bets are on, right? So it's like, you have early season Virginia, you have Uvalde Virginia, then you have that. A lot of credit depending on where you're at. I don't know about you guys, but when I hear a gunshot, I get it. Especially when I'm on a good buck and it's not far from where I'm at, I can hear it. Then I don't see.
Question right here.
to the south, you get that up south, you're going to find some better areas. Main buck bedding, you guys bow bedding. How well is this?
That's a great topic because I watched this man's video the other day about not being afraid to go in.
We've been there.
So I'm gonna let him do. But before that, I was scared. I hunted on the perimeter. I mean, I scouted on the perimeter, and as soon as I could tell it was, I backed out. So I hunted on the perimeter. But Cody's got me thinking, and this is why we're here today, right? Because if we had that magic button, we'd all hit it and leave with a big deer. You have to adapt, learn, knowledge. I never thought about that because I've always just kind of, I've killed a lot of deer. I've been killing deer with Calvert or Cody or some of these guys. And I want to, and I want to get to that level. So this is great fun.
Okay, so I think looking at this, I like to go back, right, or look at it at the most basic sense. Again, I come back to what like Brian said off the bat. This is the first time I've done any speaking with Brian, so it's interesting to hear other people's perspectives and like what you said is still ringing in my head about like people overcomplicating things because I overthink things, but stick to the basics. And woodsmanship is something that's being lost, and deer mannerisms and understanding deer just in general, what they do a little bit. So if you think about the concept, and what this question is like surrounding for me is like that general consensus of you cannot go in these bedding areas. You shouldn't do it, or you're going to mess something up. And I'd like to start by saying that deer, we view pressuring deer totally bizarre. These deer are pressured every day. They avoid coyotes, they avoid people, hikers, whatever. Their mission is to live, reproduce, and just avoid danger, right? So the act of actually pushing a deer out of his bed and being more aggressive, if done properly and not too excessive and often, if you don't badger him, what it does is it actually firms it up. It justifies that spot in their mind as a safe place. So if you look at it like that, and I use these instances of like watching bucks, like if anybody's ever had the privilege to watch bucks bedded up, like in the timber and national timber, I've watched bucks sit there and either get pushed by coyotes, do big loops, let the coyote go through and come right back to that same bed and buck the bed down. Like they do that all the time on like a daily basis. They're getting pushed constantly. It's not as bad as you think. Now, if you're going in there every day and you're pushing him out of that bed, well then he's gonna start to think, well, hey, this ain't worth it. Like I'm getting away, but what the hell, man? I keep getting like it's just too chaotic, right? Then that's when people mess up. They do it a little bit too aggressively and over aggressively. And that's why it's important to capitalize on that first time when you go in. Do it right away because as soon as you go in there and start boogering up that spot, when they come back, like that's your one shot, especially with them big boys. They're not going to tolerate somebody messing around a lot. And I know some of you guys heard this, and I'm going to, or maybe not all of you, but I'm going to use an example. So, and I've used this a couple times in the Roadshows now, but this year, it's so fresh, and it's a perfect example of how I like to do things, right? And this was in Tennessee, and it happened real time. So every morning I get up and I go for runs, whatever, and I typically hit trails on, either public pieces of ground, hiking trails, whatever, bigger tracks, whatever. We were down in Nashville, and before the Roadshow, I went on a jog, right? So, I'm a couple miles into these, nice windy trails. We were right off the edge of a lake, and as I'm coming around this bend, I stand up a deer. I'm coming around this little bend, hooks right where it cuts tight to the interstate, and I stand up a deer. And I do this all the time. Every time I run, I'm running in deer, I'm seeing deer, I'm scouting and running. It's a habit, right? And even though I have no intention of hunting this place, I noticed there's a deer there. Well, I stood him up and I kept running. And I purposely keep running. I don't pay any attention. I don't stop, I don't look at him, I don't try to see what he is. I don't put my phone up to him, I don't take a picture, nothing. And I seen, when I spit him up, he was a buck. He had nice big babies, right coming out to the ears. And I just ran by him. Same pace, didn't change a thing. As I'm running, I take out my phone and I mark that pin on it. So I mark it, and then I keep going. I go about maybe another 5 minutes, whatever. So I did a big, probably half-mile loop, and I'm just for shits. Now I'm coming back. I'm coming the exact same way. Probably 15, 20 minutes later, I come back around, and now I got my wits about me, and I stand him up again. He was right in the same spot. Now he never ran. He just stood up, watched me get by, like they typically do, if they'll even stand. A lot of times them big ones will stay hunkered down until they know that they're actually, it's danger and they got to get out of there. So I stand him up this time, and I'll do this during the season. I've killed a lot of deer doing this. This time I stopped, looked directly at him, and started a hard walk toward him. Now he knew. He's like, shit, I better get the hunt. So he runs. He runs off. I don't know where he goes. I don't care. Then I go in there, and I went over, looked at the area, seen multiple beds, position. I knew this was a little area. It was in this little kind of V in between the trails. And pulled out my Onyx. Again, looked at the kind of lay of the land, checked the wind for the next day, and then I started looking at the spot. Like, okay, I got a west wind tomorrow. How could I kill this buck? And the way it's set up, it just so happened. I mean, it was probably a couple 100-yard walk from the interstate. I parked at the interstate, slipped right in there in the AM before he came back, and been there to kill him. Hands down. Like I bet a lot of money that deer would have died the next day. I knew by the first cycle around that he was confident in that area. He stayed there, right? Then I kicked him out. Now he's off. You know, like he got away safely. That next morning, that buck is back there. I guarantee you. As long as the conditions are the same, and that's a principle. Like when you intentionally bump a deer like that, called the bump and dump. It really, and Dad coined that back in the day. And a lot of times he was encountering more aggressive deer. Like, cause that's now deer personality comes into play too. Like you start getting a dominant deer with an aggressive personality, and that deer is only going to run maybe 20, 30 yards. Or that's another misconception. These deer are only going to run as far as they need to escape the danger. The concept that a deer is going to run 6 counties away is completely absurd. Why would a deer run 6 counties away? If you're chasing him, he'll run 6 counties away. But when you bump him, he's just avoiding that danger. He doesn't want to go run 5 miles, 10 miles. Now, it might so happen that if you're in a mountainous region, you know, as like the actual steps count, you know, let's say he bugs over the top of a ridge, but he can still see you. And he goes clear to that ridge, so he's clear over the next one. It could be a longer jaunt, but it's the principle is still the same. If a deer ran across counties every time he got bumped up or scared by a predator, I mean, yeah, it's not how it works. So keep those things in mind, and when you encounter those spots, the spots are hard to find, and I don't take too much stock in buck bedding, doe bedding, whatever. Dude, these bucks, I've been on so many bucks that bed in so many different spots, so many different scenarios, like with does, without does, like, don't get caught up in there. When you find those deer and you pick them up, or you find, you know, a giant bed, a bed that reeks of tarsal, and just, I mean, like, you know you got that, you have to capitalize on that, and then you use that situation. Don't get caught up in so much analytics of like, well, what do I do in this bedding or that bedding? And you gotta play it by situation. Some of the biggest bucks I killed were in beds out in the open, not near anything, that were just sort of by like just brushy tag patches on the edges of swamps, or like, or I told a couple years ago I couldn't get one killed. I couldn't figure him out. I was chasing him down this ridge all like probably 3-4 weeks, and he was tearing this ridge up, and I'm like, and one day I just changed up my entrance route, and I ended up bumping him. He was bedded out in an alfalfa strip, in like quarter mile off the timber. Never even, I was so concentrated thinking he was in the timber, because there's all this prime bedding, and there's so many nomadic bucks out there, right? So you'll find, you go to the Midwest and you start looking for beds, or buck beds, or whatever you want to call them, your head will start to spin, because there's beds everywhere, they bed everywhere, and they bed different spots every day. So, you know, that's a losing battle if you're Mr. Bedman. So, and it becomes, well, that's another thing to touch on too. And I'm rambling, I do this, but so many people get so obsessed with the bed, and you don't need that. And I hear it from so many guys at shows, they overlook the obvious kill info just to find a bed. Oh, I gotta find where he's bedded. I gotta kill him on the bed. I gotta be on the bed. I gotta be on the bed. Even like that sign you're hunting, you're not seeing him. It's okay to expand out. That deer is walking by a lot of trees. He's covering a lot of ground. All you gotta do is find that one spot that you can intercept that pattern. And I know that car hood scrape is tempting down in that bottom, but it's down there and it's primary for a reason, and the thermals are a bitch down there, and you ain't gonna get away with this. So don't even try. Back up and start to think about where that buck's coming from to come hit that primary scrape. And when you start to like be opportunistic like that and not get so caught up in like, well, I gotta you don't even have to know where he's bedding. If you know where he's eating, you know, whatever. So take that with a grain of salt too.
I like hunting doe bedding for it. If I know a buck bedding somewhere, all right, I want to know where I can catch him coming in and out. I don't need to know exactly where he is for me. I like to hunt, and I will even get right into bedding sometimes because bucks know does are there. Even if you bump them does out, buck doesn't know. He's going to come check doe bedding, especially towards the rut, pre-rut. Wants to know where those does are, especially that first doe that's going to come in the heat. I'll sit right in bedding, or you have those areas where the does kind of mill around, lay down, get up, move that kind of 10, 11 in the morning. I want a doe laying here, a doe laying there, one there. That's what I'm most confident. I will be right in there.
Dave, do you have any best practices on bedding in steep country? Like, what do you see regularly, like in like big mountain bedding? Like when it comes to buck bedding or doe bedding, or like how do you approach bedding? Like what are kind of some commonalities you see or taught on bedding?
As you and I were talking about, usually like early in the season, the deer in general will bed low in the hollows to alleviate themselves from the heat. But as the season progresses, they will move up and use terrain features and the thermal wind you're talking. That place where the thermal and the prevailing winds, where they interact, finding those areas, you'll be in the gold. That's where I find a lot of the bed. And the bucks, Cody was spot on. The bucks, they do not bed in the same bed all the time. They will have multiple beds. And I've heard even this said before, which proves your theory, by another guy. There's some guys who did a video years back, some guys in Virginia, I don't know who they were, but this one guy's theory was, if a buck survives when you bump him, then his plan worked.
It was successful.
His plan worked. Why wouldn't he do it again? So,
what?
So this is when I think buck becomes unkillable. When he gets your scent and associates it with danger, because then you got a dangerous situation. So they know how to survive. They know how to avoid predators. I think that all deer have weak spots. There's been deer I've banged my head against. Like, I don't kill every deer I'm after, 100%. Like I mess up a lot, and there's a lot that seem unkillable. I'd like to think there's always a spot, but the toughest deer I've ever hunted. It's happened multiple times, and I've never killed a single one of them. Actually, I killed one of them, and it was the biggest deer I ever killed, and it was the most rewarding experience ever. But even so, I seen in his eyes, I seen it, because he got my wind, and I got an arrow in him right before he knew what was up. And I'm really big at deer. I'm really keen in on deer management. I try and get as close to deer as possible and observe them as so granularly as possible, and I watch everything they do. And that buck, when he got my wind, I seen the fear in his eye. He knew exactly, not that he feared me, but he knew instantly he was screwed. He was like, and he started to backstep, and right as he backstepped, I put him through, right behind the shoulder. But prior to that, I have chased deer for 60, 70 days. And no matter what I did, all the tactics, tried to be bulletproof, like they knew, they know it well. Now that doesn't exactly mean age. Because I also think that sometimes the older a deer gets, the easier he is to kill. Because they get lazy, they get in their ways, they have established patterns. Old bucks, they just, especially the dominant ones, they feel like they rule the roost, and you can almost challenge them sometimes. But I find that middle-aged deer is very cagey, like not super young, but maybe not as old, maybe not high on the pecking order, but he's watching his ass. on a daily basis just so it doesn't get kicked by bigger bucks. And he's avoiding danger, and then he gets the tip off that you're on him. That's a hard deer to kill.
And you run into that. You run into that with your dad before too, right? Where like your dad's been on one that just has his number, and then you can come in and get right on it.
Yeah, and I can use that. Like if I have that intel, I know. Like Dad is a phenomenal hunter. When he can't get one kill, I know what's going on. I'm like, oh, he's got him pinned. And there's no and it's tough, dude. It's a tough game, and it's because they're so
It can be your property too. That's another thing I was talking about, burning up small properties. Maybe that deer has become unkillable on your 3 acres because he knows I cannot come here. I've called sent too many times out. If you had access to there, you probably could go chase it down and get it. But you may make your spot area.
So in short, I think you can make this unkillable. But are they unkillable? I don't think there's a deer that's that wise that's just completely unkillable. I think you can make it. And the blue man.
So,
if you're him.
Okay, so like at what point do you come off of the sign? Because we run into this, or at least I do, on one property in South Carolina where the sign it's not producing anything. Like you're sitting morning, evening, wind's right, everything's right. The scrapes are getting hit at night, but they're not daylighting whatsoever within the range where you know that they are, but you just can't figure out how to get in there and get on them. Is there a point in which the season you abandon that sign and go somewhere else? And like, what are the cues to do so?
Like you saying, work backwards. If you know they're showing up here, but they get there too late, where are they coming from? Step back, maybe even just 80, 100 yards, you may find, say you're trying to kill them on a field edge. Well, if they ain't coming there till dark, you may find that spot of acorns or locusts or something where they're feeding on that before that half hour before dark. I just start pushing in a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further until hopefully you are catching them with some light.
University of Alabama did a study. It's incredible. It was this map of the soybean field, and then it went back into this open timber of woods, which led to this giant thicket. It showed pings of dots. They had a collar on this buck. It showed pings of where he was for like, I think 2 years. It showed his data, right? In that window of and it showed the times. In that window, when you could have killed him at that field edge was like 2 days and 2 years. But there was tons of sign there. You step back into the woods, your opportunity came up to about 5 times in 2 years.
As somebody who hunts probably pretty similar to stuff what you're we up North Carolina and you're in South Carolina, I actually don't hate those situations because what it is when you go in, or is it pine thicket stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Chris and I both can relate to this because we've experienced this a bunch of times. A lot of times, our bucks, you guys have a long rifle season like we do, right? Like, I don't necessarily know how long Maryland or Virginia's is. Ours and yours are September and yours in August.
Yep.
So what happens is a lot of our bucks, they'll get the pressure is so amplified and their condition year after year after year that if they're visiting, that they're shooting. So they'll anchor down in super thick cover. And they'll move within that cover, and they'll try to set themselves up so where they have the resources that they need to hang in through the day before they branch out at night and lay down all that sign. So I like it because typically when you find that spot, like let's say you've got a spot that's just getting hammered with sign in the southeast, tons of it, and you sit it a couple times and you're just maybe seeing does, but you're not seeing him, that just means you got to go bust him up. And I don't think he's going to go get out of the next county because our pressure is so amplified. He's found the only spot that he can live in, and it may be 60, 80, 100 yards, and it's in a pine thicket. It's on the edge of an SMZ, whatever it might be. He'll be back there at some point. It may be a couple days or a week, but you can then count on it and also factor in how you're going to hunt it. So a lot of those deer, like where we hunt, aren't moving until after dark. Mornings is like the time to kill a deer like that because he's gone. He's out doing his thing. So you can get in there early and play your thermals right set up on him coming back. But you can't beat him in there because he's already there. And it's too thick. You can't see him, but he knows everything you're doing. So just take that into account is going off of what they said. You like backtrack, identify, okay, if I'm not seeing him, where could he be? And then go get in there. Like go get in there and try to find him. Or maybe if you get into that fine ticket and you find where all this stuff sign is clustered up, all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, I know he's here, right? Like this is where he is when he isn't here. Now you've got that puzzle piece, and then it's up to you to figure out how to manipulate that. I mean, I don't discriminate hunting mornings and early season, but I'm also diligent about my access. So that's the big thing. It's like you have to be aware of the impact that you're going to make on a given property. And one of the things that I tend to see, at least down south in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, etc., is some properties are just morning or evening properties, and they will never be anything other than that. That's just the way it is. Like most of my places are one or the other. I cannot hunt them both times. So like Dave talked about having options. A lot of the bucks, I'm hunting 2 bucks at the same time, and I'll hunt one in the morning and one in the evening because the only way I can hunt one is in the evening, the only way I can hunt the other one is in the morning.
That actually plays into your question too, because sometimes the ground just makes them unruly. Like, because there's spots, man. I don't do buddies all the time. If we're like if we're at an area where I frequently know, they go find all this sign, they're all jacked up, and I'm like, and then I'm like, oh, where are you going? Oh, I'm gonna check over here. And I'm like, don't even bother. Oh no, I'm going, and they don't listen to me because it's so tempting. I'm like, it ain't gonna happen. It's not gonna happen, and that's where 80% of your hunters, they just sit there and they wait for November. They wait for that situation to change when the bucks start slipping, because that's when you're going to get killed in those scenarios. The better game plan is to make your own luck and look it up in season, have backups, have different areas. There's still areas that I'll find, I'll scout them, they'll be hot, and I'll be like, no, I'm not even messing with it. But once I look at the ground and knowing what I know about thermals and wind direction and where the deer are coming from, I won't even try it. Like, there's a lot of ground. Yeah.
Some places it's pretty freaking hard.
Well, and then so there's
that's just the reality.
And even in that scenario though, something like outside the box thinking that you can actually go and manipulate that deer a little bit. If you got them pinned down and it's just a matter of like situation where you can't hunt them, you have to go actually purposely move them. And I'm talking maybe even bad because depending on your location or layout of the property. If you look up the big piece and he's on your piece and he ain't gonna get killed by a neighbor, you gotta go get him on his feet and push him out. Get him out of that area because he knows he's safe there. Get him out of there and then try and tie into his beat pattern. I killed a buck like that a couple years ago. I couldn't figure out where he was. He was in the corn. And I do think when you jump him up, they resort to a beat pattern and then they cycle back to the hay. And if you can kind of do some testing and figuring out like where he's going, then you can try and hunt him on that secondary course, which might have a pinch in the armor. Yeah.
That's what we're here for, Bob.
It sounds like to me like you got a spot where it's really hard to hunt and you know it's holding a giant, right? Then yes, exactly. So that's a strategic. I'm not saying hunt. Like 9 times out of 10, when I bump deer, I don't even have a bow. I'm not hunting. I'm pushing this man. I am going strategically to get them off their feet. Now, and I want to preface this too. A lot of people hear this and they get all fired up, and then they go out first day and they're just tromping trying to jump up. You don't need to do it then. Like, don't do it until you need to do it. That's a scenario where you're like, damn, I can't do it. And you don't want to wait, because if you wait till November, he's going to take off.
Yep, that sounds good.
You need to make it happen before it's too late. So exhaustion.
Yeah, that's what it said it was going to be. Maybe it'll go around. Patience and all.
whether he was confident there at one point, or that deer had been there at one point, or a lot of times you like to establish bedding areas. If it's more of an area, then you can go back to the confidence. But sometimes there's satellite beds, like, you know, you might not. Don't hang your hat out.
If it starts raining or gets a little too squirrely, we may just bump in there inside if that's cool with you guys.
Are they calling for it?
You guys just want to up and move inside real quick? Just continue the conversation on in there? Just kind of avoid everything?
Get a roll. I say we wait till it rains.
Yeah, just wait till it rains.
We already went.
Yeah, right.
Really keyed in on the past couple of years, and it really touches into what he's talking about. And what Cody was just mentioning, an A and a B pattern, right? For where I am, it's usually a northwest wind, right? All of a sudden, we'll get those 4 or 5 days of south wind. And those deer, where are they? They are not on, especially in hill country, they're not going to bed on a good area for a northwest wind when it's a south wind. They're not going to do it. They're going to go to their B pattern. But when that first day switches back from south back into northwest again, I know where they want to be, and I can feed them back to that spot. And if I can catch the wind, be there while the wind's actually switching, the wind isn't working in his favor. I can be to the spot he wants to be before he's ever there, knowing that's when he's going to go back. So if I usually have northwest wind. If I have 3 or 4 days of south wind, as soon as it starts switching back to northwest, my ass is up a tree where I think he's coming right back to. That's a way to catch him in that A to B without bumping on him.
Do you ever hunt switching winds in the mountain? Like there's a lot more variability, I think, in the big mountains than the wind. So how do you handle wind switches in like big mountains? Like, do you ever target a wind switch, or like how does that? I'm curious from like a big mountain, a big Appalachian, West Virginia perspective on wind switches.
I try to set up initially so that setup will handle as many variables as possible. Like, I try to set it set on the end, like where a point, like 2 flats come out, they come into a point, and then they go over a hill. I will, if the wind is right, I will try to get on the tip edge of wherever I can, so that no matter where the wind is going to go, maybe one northeast weird wind. Maybe that's the only wind that would get me, which would rarely happen. That's where I try to get set up.
You do the same thing here in like hill country and flatland the same way.
And if I know it's going to go from north to northwest, west, southwest, ultimately south, well, now I'm going to set it up for a west wind as well and help for that swing, knowing they're going to want to come back to their beds where they feel safest on the predominant.
And that's the big advantage of hunting mobile, is that you can make that switch really easy and really quiet.
Question over here.
Yeah, in your scouting, what part does other hunter activity take into that, and do y'all use that, play that to your advantage, whether it's setting up so if you know somebody's hunting over here, they're going to bump the deer to you, stuff like that. Do y'all use that and anticipate that?
It's one of the first things I key on, especially public property. I'll drive around, I'll mark where can I legally park, and I'll see how many people are in the parking lots. And where people access and where people are is not where I want to be, because it's not where deer want to be. Sometimes the best way to find deer is go where people aren't. But the property I killed my deer this year, there's 6 other people that are allowed to hunt this piece of property. I killed deer there by staying away from all of them. I literally will hunt in between and around where I know people are for access. I mean, deer do the same thing.
I hunt that way. Where I hunt, I have some farms that join other hunters, and I use that to my advantage by being there before they get there. I'm already in my tree, so I see their lights coming up, and I'm smiling, and I see a little flashlight going up in the woods, and I hear deer running. And here they come underneath of me, and every time, like clockwork, they leave at 9:30. Then there they go, and then here comes deer swirling back. And I'll usually catch a really nice deer about 10:30. Typically, Never got one early in the morning, but I used that to my advantage. And these guys were like clockwork.
You know, my urban spot, I caught 2 hammers coming back to bed. They pattern people better than we pattern them. They have you pattern even better.
A little mud don't hurt.
Nah, it's gonna wash right over here on this side. That's where I'm just wiping
Oh, yeah,
off
put
right.
it on
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a ridge top or a big flat where there's a lot of oaks. And then you've got either one or multiple valleys between where you know he's bedding and coming from. So the thought is how do you, where would you hunt
Yeah, I only need one.
scenario? Would you hunt close to the food or would you hunt close to the bait?
Appreciate it.
Yeah, see, I need this.
If you have a specific creek crossing, if you have a bluff where they have to go around it, like anything that's going to pinch them, force them down to a smaller spot. Bottoms, creek crossing, like any type of.
You have a lot of acorns, you said? Yeah, acorns are enormous. I love acorns. I love acorns. I don't understand more dough. Like going to a bar. You want to go to a bar back in the day. You want to go to a bar with a lot of ladies, right? You want a lot of guys, but that's how deer are. Watch the big buck. You can keep them around with the acorns and stuff. Chances are you can pull out.
I mean, I'd say, to add to that, you want to find a point in that travel route, I don't care if it's the beginning or the end, that you can access and use the thermals and wind and all that to your advantage.
I would say too, something that I think would tie into the type of habitat that I think Dave went is like, at least for me, I very rarely see bucks just running like open, like ridges like this, just going straight up and down. So like if you got feed over here and here, he's probably gonna set the wind in his face somewhere, and he's gonna work his way in and out of those hills where he can keep the wind advantage. He may get down in the bottom. Yeah, but he's not just gonna go like if you got food here, and then imagine this big McDonald's sign, and there's food here, and he's here. He's not just gonna go boop boop like not. I mean, he might, but not intentionally. Would you agree, Dave? He's gonna take the long way, working the top third of those ridges.
You'll learn that travel will change. If he's using it, sometimes when the foliage is on, they'll use main ridges. But then when the foliage drops, they'll come off first flat off the ridge for protection. So you'll learn as seasons change that pattern. You're on camera. What you were talking about, using some kind of a scent checker to check scent as you're going, try to have an idea where you think the deer may be already, either bedding or going to bed, or where they will be as you're at them. Then check your wind as you're going in, and try to find that. I use my maps to do that a lot of times. Like I use maps to identify, okay, I'm going to try to access from this way. Maybe I can walk up this creek bottom, which will keep all of my foot scent away. Walk up the belly of a creek, and then maybe just hop up on the hill and be my stand. Using terrain as access to cover you, hide your scent, hide your noise. Using terrain to hide.
So to dive into that, just specify. Remember, a lot of your access depends on what your thermals are doing when you're accessing, right? So what Dave talked about, like you touched on it there with the creek bottom access.
Yeah.
So it's depending on where your deer are first, where those thermals are going to fall. Because in an ideal world, in hill country, you want to stay at the bottom in the morning because your scent is falling. But there are times where access to the bottom may put you visible or where the deer are or where they're feeding. So then you got to get creative. So a good buddy of ours, he loves to hunt. Sometimes there's situations where imagine you've got a big north slope and it drops down into a big field edge, right? Well, if you come in the bottom by the field edge, there's deer feeding down there, then they're going to work back up. So what he'll do is he'll come in a third of the way down the back side of that ridge, so his scent is dropping off the back side, and wait until that pull. Like right here, we'd be walking up the back side of that road so that your scent's falling down that way. And then as soon as that thermal shift happens, very quickly, hop over the hill and hang a set a third of the way down where you think he's coming from, so that you're never in a situation where your thermals are jumping down to where the deer are. So it's important. Like that question is important, but it also has a lot of stipulations based on where your deer are, what the terrain type is you're hunting. You know, can you get away with it? Is there like do you have a valley that or a drainage that connects to the drainage that the deer are primarily going to use? You know, a lot of that's self-interpretation of what you got.
To add to that, this may be too much of a generalization, but if you've got a better morning hole, you find yourself blocking the top. Whereas afternoon hole, you may find yourself working down the hill since you've got thermal. If you could do that, yeah, but I'll say using that scent check, because you'll watch in the morning, 7 o'clock, it will still be pulling downhill. 7:30, still pulling down. 8 o'clock, when the sun starts to rise, the thermal starts to pull, you'll hit that scent check there, and it will shift and come right to the face. You'll know.
And you'll notice that too, even how high in the tree you are.
Yeah.
Or creeks. You're by a creek, this time you drop that hopefully it'll run down hit the tree, and you run with it, it's kind of cold and that's there, and that's all you walk and stay in that tree. You know, and not just your food set, like you said, but even your air set is going to stay in the top. Any way you can get to your food, like if you feel that buck down here, and I'll sweat 10 times as much to make sure my scent never blows in this way. I may be louder, it may take me longer, I may sweat more, but I never want my scent to go in this direction.
The takeaway is be aware, know what you're saying.
Question right here. I'm coming to you.
How much does like food phase or coming together?
I think this is a personal preference question, so I'm going to go through each individual person and let them talk about how they feel about moon phase and weather. You probably all think about this a little bit differently. So, Mark, down there, work this out.
I'll just go quick. Moon phase and weather, barometric pressure shifts. Making sure like you have better deer movement on moving barometers. When the barometer is moving, that whether it be the front coming in or front going out, that's when the best deer moves.
Just like fishing.
It's like fishing, a lot like fishing, yeah. And the moon teamed up like fish and talk during the rut. Moon teamed with temperature will affect like daylight rut activity, I believe. Like in years that you have extremely warm spans during like November, you'll see a lot of nighttime rutting activity and not as much day. But when it's cold and you get the moon, yeah, those are lights out. So, yeah, but that's just different.
And I'll keep it simple because I'm not moon phases of red moon and that kind of stuff. I'm old school and I always know when a moon's up high. Chances are my activities from 10 o'clock in the afternoon. I've shot deer from 11 to 2 or 3 moving. Early mornings and evenings doesn't work for me most of the time. I've learned that for many years. So I always know that when I plan my hunt. I only have selected time to hunt. When I see a big moon coming around, depending on the rut activity, but I'm typically saying usually early morning, late evening, more activity in the afternoon. So I try to play more than I sit during that time. I've been recorded that way, and that's just how I hunt.
And I think the full moon hunt at noon. You heard that? Full moon hunt at noon, like during the rut. Yeah. I saw that. Like sometimes the buck will be rutting all night because of the full moon, and then he'll bed down a little while in the morning, and then at noon he'll get back up and start looking for does.
Now, moon definitely affects feeding, and as you hear, a lot of the way I like to kill bucks is by being on the doe, right? That's what the bucks want, is the doe. Why are you seeing that rut activity on that moon? because you got doe feed activity on that moon. That's why the bucks are up and moving, because the does are up and moving, right? Now, am I going to look and say, hey, here's what I'll do with moon. If I can hunt Tuesday or I can hunt Friday, maybe I'll look and say, oh, you know what? The moon's better for an evening set on Friday, I'll go Friday. I'll never be like, I can go hunt today. It's not a good moon, I'm going to stay home. No. If I can choose one day or another, maybe I'll use the moon as a factor, but I'm never going to let the moon keep me out of it. That's
kind of a mix between all of this. I would say I don't have enough seasons to tell you like, oh man, I've killed 3 bucks in this specific. I haven't done it, but I can say if it's a bright moon, I have not had good luck in the morning, like you said. And also to add to that, again, I may use that moon guide or something to kind of persuade me if I'm doing a coin toss of where I'm hunt or when I'm going to hunt. I may use that to kind of help me, but I have had a season or two where it seemed like everything was keyed right in on that thing. It was like, man, this is all you need to kill deer. But it's not true.
a bad wind, I'll abandon a hunt. Man, the wind's not right, I'm not hunting. A bad moon, I'm still hunting.
I'm going to get a little like science nerd on it. I'll ask Dave to help me with my verbiage here so I don't mess this up. Crepuscular, is that the right word? Crepuscular, is that deer? Is that the word? What about deer being, their movement predominantly is morning, like pre-dawn or at dawn and at dusk. Is that the word, crepuscular? Is that the word?
It is
Habitat manager? I think that's the word, whatever it is.
We can use that. We can use that.
Oh yeah, we'll use that. So, point being, that if you look at the studies like Dave talks about the Alabama study, there's not enough consistent data to suggest that there's just hard movement on the middle of in the middle of the day. They move based on a number of things. They move in the dawn and the dark because that's when they can see the best.
You're talking about the changing photo period?
Yes, the wind. Is that what
the changing of the photo period? This is true.
Yeah.
Like what it is, it's the retina in their eye detects how much light comes in each day, and as that shortens, their body releases the hormones in the body, which sets them off into rut.
So there's that, but it's
shortening of the photo period.
So there's that, but that's so there's 2 things. So we'll get to that in a second. What I'm referring to is deer in general are dawn creatures and dusk creatures. Yeah. That's what science shows us. There's not a lot of data that suggests that there's just consistent movement that you can always count on full moons in the middle of the day. Now there's seasonal variations. There's rut, like you talked about that photo period. There's pressure. There's other things that may push deer to move in a variety of ways. Like Brian and Zach will talk about killing bucks at 10:40. Those bucks weren't coming back to bed or moving at 10:40 necessarily because it was a full moon. It was because they were getting bumped by other guys leaving the stand. That tends to be a lot of the case, and guys will push that off on saying, oh, it's a full moon. I've killed bucks at 7:15 in the morning, like right at the crack of daylight on a full moon, and I'll kill deer right at the last light on a full moon. The buck I shot in North Dakota 2 or 3 years ago was a bright full moon, and I shot it right at last light, and I shot a buck in North Carolina the year prior right at the first thing in the morning on full moon. So they move based on dawn and dark the most consistently, and then there's variations to that based on the other factors that apply to their environment. So I would always encourage you to not look at everything like, don't throw all your coins in a hat. Don't go, I'm not going to hunt today because of the moon, or I'm not going to hunt today because of this. And the second half of that question was weather specific. So something to note regarding weather is I think that we talked about it at other road shows, is there's a misconception, everybody being like, oh man, it's drizzly rain or it's rainy today, I'm going to go scout and blow a bunch of areas out, like it's going to wash my scent away. Going back to the data and going back to what we know about scent, when it's raining, if it's not just a downpour, just flood pour, if it's drizzly and just damp out, it's going to hold your scent longer. They can smell you better in that environment because the scent that you leave stays longer. If you look at, does anybody here houndsmen? Anybody hunt bears? Anybody have hounds? Okay.
July, October.
Exactly.
Bluff Creek. That's when you don't have scent.
It's hard. It is hard. It is hard to run a hound and run a predator like a mountain lion or a bear when it is dry. Like, am I wrong? If the dogs have a hard time catching that scent, they run on sight. They may pick up a little bit here or there. But when it's wet, you got a heavy dew or a frost. Man, them jokers are off. That's why mountain lion hunting out west goes on in the snow a lot, because it's so easy. They can smell the moisture holds that scent. So something to think about is don't always go scout when it's a downpouring rain, and also know you can probably get away with a little bit more when it's super dry and super hot, because your scent's dissipating faster. And I was going first of all, so I just want to hear your all stuff. So I've not told them this yet. This is a neat talk. I think because of that, I think that the reason bucks freshen up scrapes after a rain is not because they are freshening them up to make them fresh. It's because they can smell them better after the rain.
It's pretty chewy.
Yeah. So and I think the reason I think that is I think that when that rain hits, like, does anybody ever hear the theory like whenever it rains you stop getting pictures on your camera? Like, you're like, oh man, I don't get any buck pictures like for a week after it rains. And it's like, well, the scent that you left on that camera strap's probably just reeking in that spot.
I mean, a good example of that scent and how it works is most of us probably played football. Our pads were horrible. And then they dry and you can throw them in the back of the car. You put them back on for 15 minutes, do your warm-up, and everybody in the huddle's like, ooh.
Yeah.
As soon as it gets warm and moist again, nasty.
Same thing with scrapes. So after a rain, and the principle is still the same, right? Like, if you're going to go hunt a scrape after the rain and he comes back and hits the scrape, it doesn't matter whether he's hitting it to freshen it up or hitting it because he can smell it. He's hitting it either way. But the point being is to keep in mind, there may be scrapes that have a stronger pull to certain deer because there's a higher density of deer that are hitting them, like a big hub scrape, like a big thermal scrape. So after a rain, instead of me going out and trying to identify where scrapes are during the rain or scout during the rain, I'm going to use the intel that I have and go, oh man, I know there's a big scrape near a bedding area that a buck likes to drop into. I'm going to sit that joker first thing because he's probably sitting there in his bed at the top of the hill, it's just reeking. He can just smell every deer that's hit it in the last 4 weeks, and he's going to go there.
Yeah, I'm gonna play off
I personally don't, but that's a better question for you. Do you ever freshen scrapes up?
Oh yeah, I just right in. Every day.
I've had cameras on scrapes up the mountain, and it would be dead for 2 weeks. I piss in it, and within 4 hours, I target something.
All my mock scrapes, the most important thing for a scrape that deer are going to use more than once is the licking branch. They want the orbital scent, they want all those different gland scents. The licking branch is more important than the ground. I will take the branch, especially something like this, these oaks that are rubbery, you can't just snap them. Bend it down till it's hanging about this high off the ground, scrape the dirt, piss under it,